In chapter 1 of the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali introduces the very essence of yoga, not as postures, but as mastery over the mind. Watch till the end if you've ever longed for peace beyond the chaos. Ath Yognushsanam. With these simple yet thunderous words, Patanjali begins, not with philosophy, but with now. Yoga is not theory. It is a living discipline that begins the moment we choose to turn inward. In that declaration lies a challenge and a promise. The transformation starts when you're ready. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodh. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. Not fighting the mind, not fleeing it, but mastering it with such finesse that thoughts lose their grip and a deeper consciousness emerges. It's this clarity, the still lake of the mind, that becomes the gateway to truth. When the mind is still, says Patanjali, the seer abides in its true form. This is the soul's most intimate reunion with itself. It's the moment when you stop being your job, your trauma, or your desires. What remains is pure awareness, untouched and vast. When the mind is not still, we identify with its movements, its fears, desires, and stories. These mental fluctuations, vrittis, pull us into illusion. We forget who we are, mistaking the screen for the movie, the waves for the ocean. Patanjali lists 5 categories of thought: right knowledge, wrong knowledge, imagination, sleep, and memory. He doesn't condemn thinking. Instead, he invites us to become aware of the types of thoughts we entertain. Mastery begins with observation. To overcome mental fluctuations, 2 wings are needed: abhyas, persistent effort, and vairagya, detachment. Together, they form the engine of progress. One gives us discipline, the other freedom. Patanjali teaches that true yoga begins not with performance, but with inner commitment and letting go. Patanjali describes Samadhi as layered, from those with support, like form or mantra, to those without. It is not one peak but many, from thought-bound stillness to total absorption. Each level dissolves more of the ego until only awareness remains. These are not metaphors. They are stages to be lived and experienced. While effort is vital, Patanjali also mentions Ishwar Pranidhana, surrender to a higher power, as a shortcut to Samadhi. Whether through love, devotion, or grace, the divine becomes a compass that guides us when logic fails. This is where science meets spirit, and discipline meets surrender. Patanjali doesn't offer yoga for flexibility, but for liberation. The purpose of Samadhi is not to escape life but to experience it without distortion. In stillness, suffering ends, not because pain disappears, but because identification with pain dissolves. This is the promise of chapter 1, that peace is not an achievement, but your original state. What if your suffering isn't just a result of the world around you, but of the way your mind has been trained to react to it? Sadhana Pada begins with this urgent insight. While the first chapter speaks to the already elevated, this one reaches out to the rest of us, the seeker stumbling through doubt, pain, and restlessness. According to Patanjali, transformation isn't magic. It's a disciplined science of effort, introspection, and surrender. In a world addicted to quick results, he offers an ancient blueprint for true inner change. And as more than 300 million people worldwide suffer from anxiety today, this isn't just philosophy, it's a necessity. Watch till the end, because what you'll discover in this path could shift how you live, breathe, and love. At the root of our suffering, says Patanjali, are the kleshas, 5 powerful mental afflictions that quietly shape our lives. First is avidya, ignorance, not just of facts, but of our true nature. Then comes asmita, egoism, raga, attachment to pleasure, dvesha, aversion to pain, and abhinivesha, the fear of death or loss. These aren't just Sanskrit words. They are lenses that distort how we see the world. They create illusions that drive our choices, our relationships, our addictions. Recognizing them isn't about self-blame. It's the first courageous act of healing. Only when we see clearly Can we step off the treadmill of reactivity and reclaim the freedom of conscious living? Patanjali prescribes a simple but profound medicine, Kriya Yoga. Don't confuse this with the more popular Kriya systems taught later. It means three core practices: tapas, discipline; swadhyay, self-study; and Ishwar pranidhana, surrender to a higher intelligence. Together, they burn karma, purify the mind, and shift identity from ego to awareness. Tapas is the fire that compels you to sit even when your legs ache, to keep going when your habits rebel. Swadhyay is the mirror of sacred texts and inner inquiry. And Ishwar pranidhana? It's the ultimate trust fall, offering your actions, your fruits, even your control to the divine rhythm of life. This threefold path is not theoretical. It's alive in every sincere yogi's breath. But why do we keep reliving the same pain again and again? Because of karma and sanskars, deep impressions etched into the subtle body by past actions and experiences. These act like grooves in a record, pulling your behavior toward repetition. You may change cities, jobs, or partners, but if the sanskar remains, the lesson returns. Patanjali doesn't moralize here. He maps the mind with precision. Sadhana is the process of wearing down these grooves, not with guilt, but with grace and awareness. As we sit, breathe, reflect, and let go, these old patterns lose their grip. In their place arises a fresh stillness, a clean slate for choice. True freedom isn't the absence of suffering. It's the ability to meet it without being shattered. For that, the seeds of karma must be dissolved. According to Patanjali, even if you're not facing consequences now, karmic seeds lie dormant, waiting for the right conditions. But through disciplined sadhana, you can burn these seeds before they sprout. Just as a seed thrown into fire loses its ability to grow, karmic seeds exposed to awareness, devotion, and surrender lose their hold on destiny. This is not passive spirituality. It's radical empowerment. You are not condemned by your past. You are invited to transcend it. Patanjali emphasizes abhyas, consistent practice, as the cornerstone of progress. Even a few minutes a day, done with sincerity, reshapes your inner architecture. But practice must be accompanied by vairagya, detachment. This doesn't mean apathy or repression. It's the art of showing up with full effort, yet letting go of obsession with results. In a time when productivity and performance dominate even spiritual circles, this wisdom is revolutionary. Keep practicing, Patanjali says, not for perfection, but for purification. Not for applause, but for alignment. The path is not about becoming better. It's about remembering who you already are. From here, the Yoga Sutras introduce the yams, the ethical vows that form the bedrock of spiritual life. These are not commandments, but natural outcomes of inner stillness. Ahimsa, non-violence, softens your thoughts, words, and actions. Satya, truthfulness, aligns your outer voice with your inner truth. Asteya, non-stealing, brahmacharya, celibacy or right use of energy, and aprigraha, non-possessiveness, refine your desires and boundaries. In a distracted world, these aren't easy, but as guardrails for consciousness, they make sure your energy isn't leaking into conflict, lies, or craving. They're the first signs that yoga is working, not in how you stretch, but in how you live. Next come the niyamas, the inner disciplines. Shaucha, cleanliness, isn't just external, it's clarity of thoughts. Santosha, contentment, is the radical acceptance of this moment. Tapas reappears, this time as inner fire. Swadhyay deepens into sacred reflection, and Ishwar pranidhana becomes the devotional heart of surrender. Together, the yams and niyamas create the soil in which asana, pranayam, and meditation can take root. They're not just rules, they are reminders that the sacred is in the small, everyday choices. In brushing your teeth with mindfulness, in speaking with kindness, in returning again and again to stillness. Only after these foundations does Patanjali mention asana. Not for six-pack abs or social media likes, but for Sthiram Sukham Asnam, a seat that is stable and joyful. When the body is still and the breath is calm, the mind begins to follow. Then comes pranayam, the control and expansion of life force. Here, breath becomes a bridge between the seen and unseen. Slowly, the noise dims. The senses withdraw inward. And what remains is not silence, but still awareness. Sadhana Pada teaches that this inner quiet isn't an escape from life, it's a return to the source of all living. So, what is the goal of all this practice? It's not achievement, it's liberation. The gradual dissolution of identity, ego, and suffering into a field of vast, unshakable peace. Patanjali calls it Samadhi, absorption in the self beyond the self. This isn't just for monks in Himalayan caves. It's for the householder mother, the struggling student, the broken-hearted man. The second chapter reminds us, yoga isn't something we do. It's something we become. Through the fire of practice, the mirror of reflection, and the grace of surrender, we remember. We return, and we realize we were never separate in the first place. Imagine sitting so still, so inwardly absorbed, that time seems to slow, the boundary between self and world dissolves, and perception deepens into a realm beyond the senses. In Vibhuti Pada, Patanjali describes what happens when the mind is honed to absolute stillness, when the yogi transcends thought, body, and ego through dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, absorption. These three, practiced as one, known collectively as samem, form the core technique through which the hidden capabilities of consciousness begin to unfold. Samem is not magic. It's the science of attention. By focusing the mind with unwavering precision, the practitioner learns to penetrate the essence of any object, idea, or truth. Patanjali gives examples. Focusing on the sun reveals knowledge of the solar system. Focusing on the body unveils its inner structure. What modern science studies outwardly, yogic mastery uncovers inwardly. But Patanjali warns, these powers are not enlightenment. They are milestones, not the final destination. Among the siddhis described are clairvoyance, telepathy, levitation, and even the ability to enter another's body. To the modern mind, these may sound fantastical, but Patanjali approaches them with clinical clarity, not fantasy. They are outcomes of profound stillness. He speaks not to impress, but to alert, that when the mind becomes like a polished mirror, reality reveals itself in previously unimagined ways. The most important siddhi, however, is Viveka Khyati, the power of discernment. The ability to clearly distinguish between the eternal and the ephemeral, the soul and the body, the real and the unreal. This inner clarity is what finally severs the bondage of karma. Patanjali emphasizes that without this, all other powers are distractions. The yogi must not fall into the trap of ego, pride, or desire for display. This chapter is both inspiring and cautionary. It acknowledges the profound human longing to evolve, to touch something beyond flesh and thought, but reminds us that real freedom isn't about power. It's about dissolving identity. The goal is not to become supernatural, but to become nobody. A yogi does not seek power to dominate, but to disappear into the ocean of pure consciousness. The practice of samem is delicate. It requires balance, discipline, and surrender. For example, if one performs samem on compassion, the practitioner becomes steeped in unshakable empathy. If focused on strength, inner courage arises. The mind, when purified, reflects the divine attributes already present within us. These aren't acquired, they're revealed. Patanjali mentions the transformation of the senses, how the yogi's perception begins to transcend the limitations of time and space. One begins to hear the unheard, see the invisible, understand without language. But again, he warns, these are side effects, not signs of arrival. If the seeker becomes fascinated with the powers, the ego revives itself in more subtle forms, delaying liberation. Perhaps the most moving part of Vibhuti Pada is its silence on moral judgment. Patanjali doesn't say these powers are bad. He simply warns that they are subtle distractions. A true yogi may experience visions, voices, or even prophetic dreams, but the wise one keeps walking. They are unmoved by the mystical, always returning to stillness where the self rests. As this chapter unfolds, you sense a deep reverence for discipline, not just the kind that molds the body, but the type that empties the mind. Patanjali is saying, don't get addicted to fireworks. Real yoga happens in the quiet spaces where there's no applause, no audience, only surrender. Those who attain true freedom are the ones who walk past the siddhis, bowing to them, but not clinging to them. Vibhuti Pada is a mirror. It shows us what's possible and what must be transcended. The powers described are not fantasies, but reflections of what a trained consciousness can become. But the invitation is always deeper. Go beyond powers. Go beyond even enlightenment. Become the infinite silence from which everything arises. That's the path of yoga. What if all your seeking, every meditation, kriya, and struggle was never about gaining something, but shedding everything that was never truly you? Kaivalya, often translated as liberation or absolute aloneness, is not loneliness. It's the profound realization that you were never bound in the first place. The final chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras strips away the mystical adornments of yogic power and goes straight for the heart of freedom. This chapter begins not with praise of superpowers but with a jarring insight. Siddhis, or yogic attainments, can also arise from birth, herbs, mantra, austerity, or deep meditation. But they are not the goal. The true yogi understands that siddhis, though real, are distractions if pursued for egoic fulfillment. The path now demands discernment between what appears spiritual and what is truly liberating. Kaivalya Pada then dives deep into the mechanics of karma. Patanjali explains that impressions from past actions, vasanas, fuel the continuity of the ego and its illusory separateness. Until these subtle seeds are burned in the fire of awareness, the wheel of cause and effect continues to turn. The yogi who becomes fully aware sees karma not as punishment or reward, but as a chain that can be broken by inner stillness. The text offers profound clarity on the subtle body. It says that even the mind, which we often confuse with the self, is only a tool. It has been shaped by lifetimes of habits, but it is not who we are. Just as light reflects in water, the consciousness we identify with is only a reflection of the Purusha, the true self. The work now is not to fix the reflection, but to return to the source of the light. Patanjali describes how the mind can operate independently, even without the soul's awareness. This explains phenomena like dreams, channeling, or fragmented identity. But these are symptoms of separation, not signs of spiritual awakening. Only when the fluctuations of the mind cease completely does the yogi merge back into the infinite, no longer manipulated by past or future. As we near the culmination of this path, Patanjali reminds us that even knowledge, even truth, must be transcended. The yogi reaches a place beyond intellect, beyond insight, a state of Ritambhara Pragya or truth-bearing wisdom. This is not information, but direct knowing. Like a drop returning to the ocean, the individual dissolves into the all-pervading consciousness. But the ego is resilient. Even at the doorstep of liberation, subtle pride can arise. I am enlightened. Patanjali warns against this. He says that liberation is not something you achieve. It's what remains when even the achiever dissolves. This is why humility is the crown jewel of all yogic virtue. The yogi who has tasted true freedom has no need to proclaim it. Then comes the climax. Kaivalya is described not as a blissful heaven, but as total isolation from the constructs of mind and matter. It is being alone, not in despair, but in wholeness. No longer influenced by the gunas, forces of nature, the liberated one rests in pure consciousness. It is the state of the seer abiding in his own nature, unmoved, unpossessed, untouched. The Yoga Sutras don't end in celebration. They end in silence. No grand ritual, no final promise of rewards, just the quiet, almost unnoticed dissolving of the seeker into that which was always present. Kaivalya is not the climax of a journey, it's the falling away of the illusion that there was ever a journey. The drop realizes it was always the ocean. And now, dear seeker, the sutras fall silent, but your path begins anew. The wisdom of Patanjali is not meant to be worshipped but lived. Take these insights not as philosophy, but as an invitation. Simplify your life. Still your mind. Sit in silence. Let each breath carry you inward. If this touched you, share it. Like and subscribe to Yogi Chronicles, where we illuminate the ancient paths not as history, but as living, breathing guidance for the soul. The final step is yours to take.